There is a pattern that repeats itself so often in modern relationships that it almost feels cruel once you finally see it clearly. Many women show renewed interest, suddenly reach out, or even return emotionally at the exact moment a man stops chasing. Not when he sends longer messages, not when he explains himself better, not when he proves how much he cares, but when he withdraws his attention, his effort, and his emotional availability. This moment confuses men because it seems to contradict everything they were taught about love, persistence, and being a good man. Yet, from a psychological perspective, it makes perfect sense. What pulls her back is rarely what you give. It is what you take away. Attention, presence, effort, and emotional availability are not neutral currencies. When they are given freely and endlessly, they lose impact. When they are suddenly removed, the silence becomes louder than any message you could have sent. Distance speaks in a language the human nervous system understands instinctively. It disrupts expectation. It creates space for imagination. It forces reflection, words, explanations. And emotional speeches do none of that. They only reinforce predictability. Most men misunderstand this dynamic because they believe attraction is built through accumulation. More care, more reassurance, more consistency, more availability. In reality, attraction is often maintained through balance and polarity. When a man centers his entire emotional energy on a woman who is pulling away, he collapses that balance. He makes her the axis of his emotional world. Distance restores polarity not through manipulation, but through absence. Absence removes the constant feedback loop that allows her to feel in control of your emotional state. This is not about hating women or playing childish games. It is about protecting men from slowly draining their confidence, dignity, and time in relationships that offer no real reciprocity. Too many men spend years locked in painful cycles of hope and disappointment, interpreting mixed signals as potential and distance as a problem to fix. Distance is not the enemy. Misused energy is. When a man learns to step back without anger, resentment, or drama, he stops feeding the cycle that keeps him emotionally stuck. The purpose of this discussion is not to teach you how to get her back at all costs. That mindset alone keeps men trapped. The real goal is to explain why distance triggers her interest, how it works psychologically, and how to use it in a way that protects your self-respect rather than gambling it. When distance is used correctly, it does not make you colder, it makes you clearer. It does not make you weaker. It reveals where your power has been leaking. Once you understand this foundation, the next question becomes unavoidable. What exactly does she expect you to do when she pulls away? And why does breaking that expectation change everything? That is where the first real shift begins. When a woman begins to pull away, reduce her communication, or ask for space, there is usually an unspoken expectation operating beneath the surface. She expects you to chase, not necessarily because she wants to hurt you, but because it is the pattern she has seen reinforced over and over again. Most men respond to emotional distance with panic. They double text. They apologize for things they did not do. They ask what is wrong, then ask again when no answer comes. They offer more time, more attention, more emotional access in exchange for reassurance. This reaction is so common that it has become predictable. From her perspective, this behavior confirms something powerful. It confirms that she has you. It confirms that no matter how inconsistent, distant, or unavailable she becomes, you will continue to orbit around her emotional state. You become emotionally stationary while she moves freely. This imbalance removes any urgency for her to re-engage. Why would she feel curiosity, concern, or desire when your presence is guaranteed regardless of her behavior? When you do the opposite and calmly pull back, you shatter that script. Silence in this context is not punishment. It is a refusal to perform the expected role. You are no longer feeding the dynamic that made her comfortable pulling away in the first place. The absence of your usual reactions forces her mind to fill in the blanks. Why is he not chasing? Did I misjudge how invested he was? Did I push too far this time? Is he already moving on? Silence functions as a psychological mirror. Without your emotional reassurance, she is left alone with her own assumptions and behavior. This is deeply uncomfortable because it removes her sense of control over the emotional situation. Most women are not accustomed to men disengaging calmly. They expect arguments, emotional collapse, passive-aggressive behavior, or pleading. Calm detachment is rare, and rarity creates impact. This is the moment when curiosity replaces indifference. Her nervous system, which had relaxed into predictability, becomes alert again. The lack of emotional noise from you creates space for her to feel something she was not feeling before: uncertainty. And uncertainty, when paired with prior emotional connection, often reawakens interest. It is important to understand that this effect does not come from pretending not to care. It comes from genuinely refusing to chase validation. There is a profound difference. A man who pulls back out of self-respect carries a calm, grounded energy. A man who pulls back as a tactic carries tension and resentment. Women are remarkably sensitive to this distinction. By breaking the expected pattern, you introduce a new emotional variable into the dynamic. You are no longer the man who will chase no matter what. You become a man whose presence is optional, not guaranteed. That realization alone can trigger a shift in how she perceives you. But this is only the surface layer. Beneath it lies a deeper change that occurs within you. And that change is what truly alters the dynamic. When a man chases, he is not just moving toward a woman physically or emotionally. He is quietly handing away his power. Chasing sends a signal that his sense of worth, stability, and direction depends on her response, even if his words say otherwise. His behavior communicates that her attention is the regulator of his emotional state. This is not strength, and it is not authenticity. It is a subtle form of self-abandonment, and it is instinctively unattractive. The moment you stop chasing, something critical shifts internally before it ever shows externally. You stop reacting to her movements and start setting your own frame. Your focus moves away from monitoring her texts, her tone, and her availability, and returns to your own life. Your nervous system exits panic mode. Calm replaces urgency. Clarity replaces obsession. This internal reorientation is the real source of regained power. Power in relationships is often misunderstood as dominance or control. In reality, it is the ability to remain grounded regardless of another person's emotional fluctuations. A man who can walk away without anger, threats, or emotional collapse demonstrates something rare. He is not dependent on validation. This kind of power does not announce itself. It is quiet, steady, and deeply felt. Women sense it not through logic, but through energy. Consider the contrast. Before, you send messages that go unanswered. You wait. You check your phone. You feel smaller with every hour of silence. Your energy contracts. And she feels it even if she never consciously names it. After you create distance, the situation reverses. She grows cold or distant. But you continue living fully. You train, work, socialize, and pursue your goals without disruption. Your emotional state no longer rises and falls based on her behavior. That stability is magnetic. This is often when she reappears with a casual message, testing the waters. A simple greeting, a check-in, a seemingly innocent question about how you have been. To her, it may feel spontaneous. To you, it is the predictable result of a shift in power. You are no longer chasing her attention. She is sensing that your center of gravity has moved back inside yourself. The key is that this power cannot be faked. If distance is used as a strategy while you secretly wait, watch, and hope, the energy remains weak. Real power comes from genuinely accepting that you may lose her and being at peace with that outcome. This acceptance is what frees you. It allows you to respond rather than react, to choose rather than beg. Once you regain your power, you also regain something else that was lost in the chase, your edge. And with that edge comes a renewed sense of challenge, which is the next piece of the psychological puzzle. Attraction does not grow in environments of total predictability. When a man becomes overly available, instantly responsive, and emotionally transparent at all times, he may feel safe, but he rarely feels exciting. Many men lose attraction not because they did something wrong, but because they removed all tension too early. They made themselves easy to access, easy to understand, and easy to take for granted. Human psychology naturally devalues what requires no effort to maintain. When you step back and create distance, you quietly restore challenge. This is not about playing hard to get or acting disinterested. It is about reclaiming a life that does not revolve around one person. No instant replies, no constant updates, no predictable emotional availability. The invisible leash that kept you within reach at all times is removed. Suddenly, she cannot assume your presence, and what cannot be assumed must be reconsidered. This shift often reawakens the early phase of attraction, when you had mystery, independence, and a sense of direction that existed before her. At that stage, you were not trying to impress, you were living. That lifestyle created curiosity. Distance brings that energy back, because it reminds her that you have depth beyond the role you were playing in her life. The human mind fills gaps with imagination. When answers are no longer immediate, questions multiply. She begins to wonder what you are doing, who you are spending time with, and how you are feeling. More importantly, she begins to question her previous assumptions. Did I underestimate him? Did I assume he would always be there? Did I lose someone more valuable than I realized? These questions are uncomfortable, and discomfort drives attention. Challenge creates psychological tension, and tension sustains attraction. When everything is laid bare, there is nothing left to explore. Distance restores the unknown. It places you back into the category of something rare rather than something readily available. This is why attraction often returns when effort is removed. Not because effort is bad, but because effort without boundaries erases polarity. When you stop overgiving, you stop diluting your value. You allow space for desire to breathe again. However, distance alone is not enough. If it is used merely as a pause while you wait for her to return, the dynamic eventually collapses again. The most powerful form of distance is not empty space. It is space filled with growth, and that is where the transformation becomes irreversible. Distance only becomes powerful when it is filled with intention, structure, and forward motion. Many men believe that pulling back, going silent, or reducing communication is enough to change a dynamic. It is not. If distance is merely physical while your mind remains emotionally hooked, nothing truly shifts. You may stop texting, but you are still checking your phone. You may stop initiating, but you are still waiting. That is not strength. That is dependency wearing a disguise. True distance is not about absence from her. It is about presence with yourself. When distance is used correctly, it becomes a redirection of energy rather than a pause. The mental space once occupied by anxiety, overthinking, and emotional monitoring is now available for construction. This is where growth begins to compound. You train your body not to impress anyone, but to feel capable and disciplined again. You work harder and smarter because your focus is no longer fragmented by emotional uncertainty. You think about your future with clarity instead of negotiating your present for scraps of reassurance. As this process continues, something subtle changes in your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as a man waiting to be chosen and start experiencing yourself as a man building momentum. Confidence grows organically, not from motivational words, but from evidence created through action. Each completed workout, each professional win, each improvement in routine sends a quiet message to your nervous system you are moving forward. That message stabilizes you in a way no relationship ever could. Your social world also shifts. When you are no longer emotionally consumed by one person, you naturally reconnect with friends, expand your circle, and experience variety again. This reintroduces perspective. You remember that attraction is not rare, that connection is not singular, and that one person's withdrawal does not define your value. This perspective alone dissolves desperation if she returns during this phase. The contrast is undeniable. She expected stagnation, emotional damage, or quiet resentment. Instead, she meets a man who feels grounded, composed, and internally busy. Your attention is no longer overflowing. Your interest, if present, is measured. You ask fewer questions and offer fewer explanations, not because you are cold, but because you no longer feel the need to prove yourself. That shift is deeply disorienting for someone who assumed they occupied the center of your emotional world. Yet the most important outcome does not depend on her return. Even if she never reaches out again, you have already won something far more valuable. You have reclaimed agency over your time, energy, and emotional investment. You begin to recognize unhealthy dynamics earlier. You feel discomfort sooner when effort is not reciprocated. Not because you are guarded, but because your standards have risen to match the life you are building. Distance used this way permanently recalibrates how you relate to attraction. You no longer chase unclear interest because your life does not have space for confusion. You do not tolerate half-commitment because it disrupts your direction. Attraction becomes something that fits into your life, not something that consumes it. From this foundation, the final mindset shift becomes unavoidable. The most dangerous mistake a man can make is believing that the purpose of distance is to manipulate a woman into returning. That belief keeps his power external and fragile. The moment her behavior dictates your emotional state, you are no longer free. The real purpose of distance is internal sovereignty. It is about becoming so grounded in your own direction that no single person can destabilize you by pulling away. When you adopt this mindset, your entire approach to relationships changes. You stop scanning for signs of rejection with anxiety. You stop overinterpreting delayed replies or shifts in tone. You remain emotionally present, but you are no longer emotionally dependent. This is not indifference. It is self-trust. You trust yourself to be okay, regardless of outcomes. And that trust changes how you show up. From this internal frame, you no longer negotiate your worth through tolerance. You do not endure uncertainty, hoping it will transform into clarity. You observe behavior, not promises. You choose alignment over attachment. This is what it means to live from strength rather than need. And paradoxically, this is the state from which attraction flows most naturally. Women experience men like this differently. There is less pressure in your presence, less emotional bargaining, less unspoken demand for reassurance. You are not trying to secure a position in her life. You are offering a place in yours. That reversal shifts the entire emotional gravity of the interaction. Desire thrives where there is freedom, not obligation. By the time a woman returns under these conditions, you are no longer the man who was confused, reactive, or afraid to lose her. You have options. You have momentum. You have perspective. You are capable of walking away again if the dynamic does not align with your values. Without anger or drama. This does not make you harsh or detached. It makes you emotionally adult. At this stage, she becomes part of your life rather than the foundation of it. If she adds value, consistency, and respect, she stays. If she brings uncertainty, imbalance, or emotional drain, she fades without conflict. Your sense of self remains intact either way. That is real power. The final truth is simple but uncompromising. Distance is not a weapon, and it is not a trick. It is a mirror. It shows you where you were over-investing, over-giving, and undervaluing yourself. Use that space to build your body, your purpose, and your inner stability. Never use it to wait. When you live this way, the question of whether she returns loses its importance. You are no longer chasing outcomes. You are living from alignment.